So before I do get started, I didn't know if there's any questions other than my name. My name is Jeff Salzman, and I also am going to have this on exhibit in what they call the basement room on Saturday and Sunday if you want to see this stuff up close. But I'm going to demonstrate this now. Has anybody programmed 8-bit computers before? You did? Okay, so quite a few in here. Have you ever programmed an assembler? You did? Okay. What did you use for assembler for programming? What environment?
I was on TRS-80.
That's not.
Okay. All right. Who else did assembler? You did, but you used for IBM stuff, right?
Yeah.
Okay. What about for Commodore 64? Anybody did assembler on Commodore 64?
Oh.
Nobody.
Okay.
I did a little bit myself.
There's some guy on YouTube that he's got a long-running series on assembly programming on Commodore.
Was that a recent one?
It goes through a recent. I think he still does like.
Oh yeah, I did see that one, and I have yet to watch it.
I know, I did too.
So many things on YouTube.
Yeah, exactly. Too many distractions. Yeah.
Who's it by?
I don't remember the name. I mean, it can be looked up easily.
Yeah.
But I think I used to get his emails too.
Okay.
Talk about it. Well, with any of the 8-bit computers at the time, you had choices of which assembler environment you wanted to use. Commodore 64 is no different. There was assemblers that came on a cartridge, so you didn't have to load it every time. There you can compile for, let's see, in assembly, you can compile in C, there's C compilers for the Commodore 64. But the one that this gentleman used, his name is John Augustine, and he actually lives 2 counties away from me. I live in York, PA. He lives 2 counties away from me. Never knew the guy until I talked to him on ham radio, and then all of a sudden this stuff comes up, and I thought it's very interesting. He uses a program called the POW assembler for the Commodore computers. It actually started with the Commodore PET. A guy named Brad Templeton wrote this thing, and the interesting aspect of POW assembler is it works within the basic environment. You don't have you don't run a special environment. You just load the POW assembler. I have it preloaded here. And it puts it into memory, and to assemble, you just put a line in your basic code that calls a machine language element, and then it reads the rest of your code as assembler. And it will compile it to, by standard, it will compile it to disk. I'll show you a little bit here. I'm just going to kind of jump into it. And feel free to pop up with any questions. Sometimes these things get a little technical, and I tend to talk on a technical level. What I did here is I loaded the POW assembler in an emulator, so that way I can project it. And I loaded one of, let me backtrack a little bit, talk about this guy. This is all his code that he did in the 80s and 90s. He actually sent them to me as disk image files in an email, and I converted them all to disks. He used his computer like anybody else would use theirs for basic. So he was a ham radio operator, and he did stuff with electronics. So there's all sorts of source code in here that are just like resistance calculations, antenna design. He just wrote it all in assembler for himself. He didn't give it to anybody else except me. That was the second person to ever own these things. So that's what he did. This is his whole archive. And he also played around with writing games, like the Othello game that I have loaded up here, and the one I'm going to use for demonstration. This is all his software. The only thing he didn't write that I'm using is the POW assembler itself. Yeah. So, you know, when with a basic program you have 10, like print hello, and then 20 go to 10. You do that infamous basic loop printing on the screen. Well, this is an example of how your program will look like in the POW assembler. He actually uses the first 10 lines to do things like line 2. If he does a run 2, it'll scratch the file called Othello off the work disk that he's using, and then it'll stop. So he just launches commands he just puts it all in the same thing. He doesn't type these in individually. He just puts the top of his basic program with all these utility lines that he runs just to do things like to get rid of the file from the disk before he compiles it to the next one. He actually starts at line 10 when he runs things. So this would be, from line 10 on, this would be typically how you would use the POW assembler. You would have to, actually line 20, there's a sys command that with the POW assembler should be sys 700. What that does, when you start running at line 20, it invokes that assembly language command, and then the POW assembler takes over from line 30 on. You can see this is all 6502 opcode stuff. And it starts compiling your program from that point. It's a two-pass assembler to go through and create all the pointers for everything, and then it'll compile it and write it out to disk. What this gentleman did is he wrote his own program wedge. He starts it at that address, not 700. He designed this cable. This is the only one in existence that goes between the user ports of two Commodore 64s. Yes?
How do you get his hands on those connectors?
Well, back when he made these, they were probably, you could probably almost buy them at Radio Shack. But you can still get these to this day. There's people that sell them. I know I bought a bunch on eBay myself. But I'll be demonstrating how this works. But what his technique does is, in a nutshell, is instead of running sys 700, load up a program on the receive computer, and it goes and get it into receive mode. It's another sys command, and then you start your compilation by running line 20 on this computer, and it will compile it through the cable directly into memory on the other Commodore 64, not the disk. Yes.
Could you quickly sketch out the specs on the?
I will be doing that. Yes. This will eventually be posted on my website. I run the website vintagevolts.com, and I was kind of keeping it all secret until this presentation. I wanted to reveal it all here first, and then it's just the guy told me let everybody use it, and that's what I'm going to do. So
You have a schematic of that cable?
I'll be getting one eventually. I'm still actually learning some of this stuff myself. I only ever got this stuff to work on my own because John wasn't able to, he couldn't remember how he did it. So in January at the one of the weekly or monthly tech events that they have here for the Vintage Computer or for VCF, I brought my equipment over with the help of other people, managed to figure out what this guy did. It's like there's a certain genius level here that I was trying to get into, and we finally figured out how it works, and then I just started working on my presentation for it. But I'm going to show you using emulation how it would typically work for assembly. Let's see. I'm going to change line 20 to the original sys 700 that invokes the PAL assembler. And then I need to put a disk in drive 8. Actually, maybe I should make a move. I think the screen resolution is a little too low. That's zero. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to run line 10. What that'll do is that'll open up a file called OT on drive 8, and then it'll do the sys 700, and it'll invoke the assembler, the compiler. And this makes emulation noises. So this is the POW assembler running, and now it's on its second pass. It's a 2-pass compiler, and then hang on a second, I'll get out of everybody's way. So now it's writing it to disk. So it's a long process. Yep.
Is this emulator able to make floppy drive music like on the real machine?
No, those are just sound effects
Yeah.
that were on there. Okay, so it compiled it to the address 0801, which is hexadecimal for the start of BASIC. What it does is And for those who've used Commodore 64s with compiled programs, hang on, let me load this first. Load, was it OT, comma 8. Yeah, it took me a while to figure out some of this stuff because he would always use 2 or 3 letters for his programming. So this is Othello, so we called it OT. So there, it starts at, the first few characters are just the sys command to start the machine language compiled program. So if I run this, we have an Othello game that he wrote.
In assembly.
Hmm?
This is an assembler?
Yes, it was written in assembler. Now, yeah, John Augustine, that's the gentleman who did this, so I'm going to exit it right now. Okay, so I can still run it. So basically what he did before he created this cable and the software wedge is he would write his programs, save the source code, load it up into the environment, and had the POW running in the background. It's like a resident program. And he would save it to disk and load it up from disk and use it. And that's typically how you did that. I guess he got tired of doing that. So that's why when he had a second Commodore 64, he decided to connect the two together so he can test it on the fly, almost on the fly, using 2 systems. And that's what I'll demonstrate now. I won't be able to project this, so hopefully people can see the monitors. But I'm going to sort of repeat the process of compiling Othello, and it'll be running on this computer here. So putting the flat button here. So what he did is he created a program. Also, he just has files all over the place here. The program is actually called RX Object Second C64. That's what I run on, I'll call it the receive computer. So load RX OBJ CT slash second C64. All right. And I'm using drive 9 here. When you first run this receive program, it tells you load the sysres POW, that's his thing, sysres, on your primary computer. And here you would press a key to start the receive process. And then when it's done, you press any key to exit the receive process, and you can restart it just by typing sys319. So you can do like a run stop restore on this with the program and do another sys319 and it puts it in receive mode again. So you just keep doing that while the power's on. On this side, I'm going to load up his boot environment because he had to make his own custom changes to the POW assembler.
I'm assuming this cable is a one-sided cable. You can only put it in one way.
No, it can actually go either way. Oops.
Did he have to invent the communications?
What he did is he wired. I looked at some of the source code. I don't have it all figured out yet because there's a few tricks in there I didn't quite understand. But he's going through the what is it? The CIA or the PIA, whatever they call it on the Commodore 64. He's directly wiring the user port connects to one of the ports on the CIA. So you also got to be careful you don't short anything out because those chips are tough to replace. But yeah, it's directly wired between the hardware, the external hardware interface adapter. There's also no electrical protection. It can pick up electrical noise and probably fail a transfer. And I don't think the software has any sort of handshaking, so you just kind of cross your fingers it goes over. But it's been pretty reliable so far. So I'll load the POW Environment, his specially modified version.
So it doesn't wait for some kind of magic number before it starts, if you hit the space bar, does it
When you
wait
hit the-
for?
I think the software does have like certain characters that start it. It
Okay.
knows when to receive, but that doesn't mean noise can't get into the line and cause things to happen.
Okay.
I haven't really experienced that much. When I first hooked this up and I had this cable laying back in there, all that electrical noise I think did something, but when I moved it towards the front here, it started working fine. 11th hour presentation, I was afraid something's not going to work right. And so far, my fingers have been crossed and it's working. So he wrote himself instructions on this, change sys 700, the little part that invokes POW assembler, if you actually had the POW assembler on your computer, to the sys 36658. And some of his source code has already had that changed. So basically I have here now what I had in emulation. The POW assembler is ready to go, it resides in memory, and it will invoke itself when I run the source code. So I'm going to load the Othello source code here. And we all know how slow these drives are. Okay, so same thing that you saw on the screen earlier. This one has the sys 36658. It's all ready to go for this transfer. So I'll do a run, and I'll do run 20. I wanted to start the compiler right away. And then I press the key over here, it's in receive mode. So this is compiling, and then it'll go to the second pass. And I hope I didn't hit the space bar too many times here. I don't think I should be getting the, let's try it now. I think this will actually wait for the receiver to be ready. There we go, now it's done. Now I hit the key here, I do list, there's my program. I'll transfer it over to the cable. It just blew me away when I first saw that, but it's so simple. I mean, now the guy did some digging and stuff, but I thought, more people would be programming in assembler if they can make it that easy, to just test this up, because it was a real pain to program in assembler. Basic was so much easier. Now to make sure that there's no tricks up my sleeve, I'm going to load another program. I'm just going to pick something random from his sources. Let's see, he has a Connect 4 program.
Proofreader.
Yeah, proofreader, what is that?
I'm still going through his code. I can try to run it and see what happens. We might learn something here, but
Yeah, that jumped out at me too.
It's like the world's first Randomly.com. Without ads.
okay. Well, we'll find out what this does. So I have here, it still has the sys 700. So I'm going to change line 20 to sys, what was it, 36658.
Is that like a system call, or is that like a
Yeah,
jump?
in any basic programming environment, at least on 8-bit, sys will start a machine code or assembly program, actually it's machine code, at the address that you specify. So it'll start at that byte and interpret everything as
So it
actual.
just jumps to that address and starts
Yep.
running what's there?
Starts running it
Okay.
as a machine code.
Okay,
Jump to machine address.
okay, thanks.
All right, so this is set up for that, and I'm going to do a sys 319 here, put it in receive mode, and run 20. I don't even know what this program does, but, okay, so. There's proofreader.
Spell checker, I guess.
Well, let's see, it'll do this directory. But you know what, he may have this hard-coded for disk 8, that's actually disk 9. So it's the wrong disk number. But once again, I just compiled it to another machine. I have yet to turn off these computers. This almost seems like fun. Let's see what else he has. So I'm still going through all this stuff.
If you look far enough, you can probably find Call of Duty or something.
He was in the process of making a game for sale. He did tell me that he was going to sell it to one of the 8-bit software vendors at the time. I think it was Microprose he was trying to do it for, but that fell through. Some of these I don't know what they would be for.
Does he have Instagram?
He's here. I don't know. The more I see his programs, the more I think he was just a certified genius, and he's very humble.
Did he do this for a living? Or just as
He
a
did
hobby?
this for fun.
Yeah.
Yes.
This guy really needs a GitHub account.
Let's see. It looks like storage scope. I assume he
Sprite.
created a hardware device that would turn the Commodore 64 into a storage thing. And like I said, I'm still going through all this.
What's this Sprite thing?
Sprite Reducer. I mean, I could try to run it and send it over here, see what happens.
CGA converter?
IBM text editor.
Yeah, he told me he started going from the Commodore 64 to x86 stuff. So he did a lot of assembler programming for the IBM afterwards. So okay, which one were we going to do? Sprites.
Sprite Reducers.
Okay, we'll try that one. The Commodore 64 uses sprites for moving graphics for convenience, and this Sprite Reducer, if I have to guess, is a tool to let him take a graphic and reduce it to a size that will fit within the sprite's pixel boundaries. Because it can only be so big. I think it's like 64 bits by 64 bits or something like that. Okay, so there's a SYS 700 again, so SYS 3, I'm going to remember this one of these days. 658. And exit this. Go to SYS 319. Have that ready. Run 20. Oh. I did change to 20. SYS 658. Getting ahead of myself here.
So he locates his program at 3665.
No, what that does, the original assembler locates itself at 700. So like I demonstrated on here,
Yeah.
that's how you would normally use it to write assembler code, compile it to disk. And you would do it SYS 700. This one, either taking that long to compile or it's hanging up. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's still pretty slick on what it does. Okay, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. John may have known some glitches I have yet to figure out. Or maybe this doesn't, maybe this particular program doesn't compile well for this.
I wonder if it was meant for systems or something.
Well, we'll find out here. Let's try again. Okay, maybe not all programs work for this. Let me make sure that it's still working and not weirdly hung up. I'm going to load Othello up again. better label these disks. Yeah, this doesn't seem to be coming out. It's let's try not. I'm just going to reload the receive code. Just always forget how it's spelled. Yeah, this Othello program has almost 10,000 lines of code. Oh no, 1,000 lines of code because it's by 10.
Where's the 1,000 lines of code stored if there's only like 15 on basic program? Where are the rest of them?
Well, the way the Commodore 64 stores stores basic files, they just basically daisy chain the text that you type. So when you type one line, it has a pointer that goes to the start of memory for the next line, and it's just all daisy chain. So you keep doing that until you run out of RAM.
Kind of like con cells?
Like what?
Like con cells in Lisp?
Sounds like it, yeah.
I am not familiar with Lisp. I mean, I know the language, but is that how the
That's how Lisp stores everything.
Okay.
In the con cells, everything ends
so
with
it's like a
pointer.
linked list, right?
Pointer, yeah.
Singling
okay.
things, yeah.
Oh, this one. That's what it was. Oh, maybe I do have to turn this off and on, but not as often as before. Let's start it off from scratch again. But if there are any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer. Or if you want to see something else going on here, I can do that. But basically, this is the point I wanted to get across is how people have used these computers in a unique way to do some rapid development without having to make it as mundane as it could be.
Was there anything?
Sorry, just a quick question, since I've never programmed an assembly on Commodore. To understand the reason, what prompted this was that you have to reboot into a non-basic environment to run assembly code. That's why he developed this, to download and run in that environment.
Well, typically what you do is you would compile to disk. So you
Right.
create an executable file. And then you would have to reset your computer or something.
Okay, I missed it.
What you would do is you would lose your assembler environment.
Right.
So if it was on a cartridge, it was one thing. You know, some assembler was on the cartridge. But this one, even though it's resident in memory, sometimes you need that memory depending on what you're programming. So turn it off, turn it back on, you just lost the environment.
So he developed
Yeah.
probably the equivalent of like a crossover cable and then the software.
Yeah,
to-
we're using the term for this. We're trying to figure out what to call this. It's a form of cross-compiling. You know, real cross-compiling is to write code for one type of CPU on a machine that has a different type of CPU. You're just programming for something else. It's not going to run on the native machine.
This would be
This one, just crossing the wire.
pure code injection, wouldn't
That's a good one.
It's
So that's basically what it is, yeah. On this side, it receives it and throws it right into RAM, right where it belongs.
TCJ.
It's a remote environment.
yeah, remote development.
Maybe we should have a contest in the name.
What is Is there anything on the market in the near, that even comes close to what this is? At the time that this came out, or that he wrote this program?
I don't think so. I usually try to follow the Commodore stuff because I grew up with it. And that's what made this unique. Even other Commodore enthusiasts said they never saw anything like this before. And then what it brought for me is, I wonder if this will work on other computers, other 8-bit computers like the Apple. I mean, the concept is simple enough. As long as you can do the communications between two devices, then you just need software Wedge that stands there and receives the compiled output, but then you still have to modify the compiler to do that. I was thinking, maybe Apple.
I think the Apple might be easier because you could just take 2 audio jacks instead of needing to make a custom.
That would be awful slow, but it would work. I mean, it's still an interface that you can connect. But the Apple actually has some pretty good connectivity. There's lots of stuff you can connect. You can connect to the joystick ports between 2 Apples if you wanted to take the cover off all the time. Or you can make a card that goes through one of the expansion slots. Something similar can be done for 2 Apples that are connected together through a wire of some sort. And there's software-based assemblers for the Apple. I think the Merlin assembler is a very popular one. I've used that a few times. It's really nice. But then on the receive side, have a Wedge. The concept is pretty neat. And if this was available at the time when I was doing stuff, I'd probably be doing more assembler. I grew up playing with BASIC. So it was a game machine and I made a few programs for myself. But this guy, John, he squeezed every ounce of utility out of these computers just to have fun programming an assembler and to programming it as easily as he could without a lot of waiting. Yes, sir.
Why is there a switch on the side of your C64?
Oh, there's an aftermarket add-in here called Jiffy DOS. The Commodore disk drive was notoriously slow. So there would be cartridges that you plug in that speed up disk access by, like fast load. Years go by, and now the resurgence of vintage computing. There's somebody out there who makes something called Jiffy DOS. It's actually a replacement ROM chip that you put in, and then you put one in the drive too. This just switches that on and off, so you can be more. Some games don't work with things like that in it. Very few. So this allows them to turn off. This isn't my computer. This is from the museum. You can turn off Jiffy DOS and it'll behave like a regular Commodore 64.
It should have stuck with the IEEE 8 something standard that you had.
Well, yeah, but the cost reduction. Commodore is all about saving a penny. So they made it as cheap as possible.
And then they stuck an entire computer inside the disk drive.
They did, yeah. There's a 6502 in there.
Have you ever heard of a game called Shenzhen IO?
No, I didn't.
It's a game where you're a cheap Chinese electronics manufacturer. And
Okay.
you solve puzzles by connecting microcontrollers, ports together, and then writing assembly code. So
That sounds like it's somewhat educational.
It's called Shenzhen, Shenzhen IO, and it's on Steam and like everywhere that you can buy PC games, and it's very educational.
Okay,
And it's got a fun theme.
but you can't be like Jack Tramiel and yell to get the prices down.
Do you get like
Call saving through.
There is actually a like an economic aspect to it, because each component has a cost in whatever Chinese money is called. So like you got one
Yuan?
Yuan. So you got one component that's 3 yuan and another component that's 4 yuan, and the 4 yuan component can do more. But if you can figure out how to solve the puzzle with the 3 yuan component, then you get a score bonus for keeping the price
Keeping
down.
the price down.
Yeah.
do you get extra points for using Apple's unreliable capacitors?
No, it doesn't. All the companies in the game are fictional, so it's all sort of.
It's kind of like the way Mule is. You're productive in the Mule game, and you try to.
Yeah. Well, Mule is you're
Different
competing
factories.
against other characters at the same time. And in this, you're trying to figure out the most efficient way to do things. And your score, you can, there's actually two ways to score points. You can score for doing things like you can score you can get points by doing things as cheap as possible. You can score by doing things as fast as possible, and you can score by doing things with as few lines of code as possible.
Okay, as efficient as
So,
possible.
yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like an interesting program, but they should use that in business classes in college, right? You practice it. Is it like an app on a phone now?
No, it's a desktop.
So this is an old one that's just still
That
available,
came
or
out,
has it been
it came out
revamped?
last year.
Okay, so it's been revamped and modernized, or? It's just that new.
Are you familiar with Zachtronics?
No.
Well, he's made a whole bunch of stuff, including like a one that's based on maintaining a factory in outer space. He's made another one where it's like trying to connect chemical chains together, but it's actually a programming game using chemicals as a metaphor.
Like those sim games and stuff. That's
Yeah,
different.
yeah.
Okay.
So almost all of his games are programming in some capacity. This is the same guy who came up with Infiniminer, which is the game that inspired Minecraft.
Okay.
So yeah.
Now, that one I'm familiar with. My son
Yeah.
plays it all the time. Any questions that I can answer about this process, or I'll try to, because like I said, I'm still learning some of this stuff. I'm just glad the demonstration worked for the most part. Yes?
No question, just a comment. You're very brave to do this.
In what sense?
Stepping off the edge of the world.
Yeah, I
I
love talking about this stuff, and I'm not really a speaker, but when I have a passion for something, I can talk endlessly on it, probably off on tangents too, but I appreciate that.
When are you gonna get these cables selling on Alibaba?
Well, they probably have them already. I still have to decode, or to do the schematic work, yes.
You mentioned POW is a two-pass assembler.
Mhm.
What exactly is two-pass? What is it better
Most
than
assemblers,
one-pass?
most assemblers basically do, like if you would physically go through and hand compile, and you can do that with assembly language, you can hand compile every code, every command to the actual numbers that get stored into memory. A two-pass compiler will go through it and look at it first and say, well, we have a variable name here, but assembly doesn't use variables, so it has to create a pointer to a place in memory to store the value for that variable. So it creates, the first pass goes through and finds all that stuff and creates locations that it's going to use to store values. The second pass will then take those and actually make the code, because it has all the memory addresses that it needs to work with. So when it does the code, it knows to put this memory address in for this command because that was a variable name that was used, or a label name. Like when you do loops, you can start the loop with a name. So you can say start here, or start as the start loop, and when it has to jump again, you can say go to start. Paraphrasing, it's JSR, JMP start. But the program, the compiler program doesn't use the word start. You won't see it anywhere in memory. But start will be converted to an address, and the first pass will figure all that out. The second pass just then creates the code and changes it out. Yes?
I was wondering if somehow, if you could theoretically make this cable into a wireless signal, it could probably make like a type of like really cool like wireless program transfer back, if they still use these machines.
Oh yeah, that would probably be great in college in the late 80s, between dorm rooms and stuff like that. I mean, anything's possible. You just have to get the signal from point A to point B.
I mean, a shift register should probably do this fine. They'd probably do that.
In software, that's kind of what it's doing. It's sending, my understanding when I looked at the source code for the transfer, it's not very large. In fact, I could probably load that up, let you see what this guy did.
Is he using, how many signal lines is he sending it over?
I think he's just doing 2-wire, like send and receive.
Oh, so like modem cable type deal?
Yeah, it's something very simple. It's serial-like, but it's not compatible. to modern day serial standards. Which disk was this? Of course, I pick an unbelievable disk. This one. Hang on, I'm trying to remember, it wasn't. I think it's POW C64, we'll find out. Guy gave me no instructions on these programs. I've been loading them up from time to time and just looking at the source code, see if I can figure out what it does. It's fun, but it does take time. I just couldn't believe that something like this could still be found. I thought everybody knew all the history, and anybody who's active into the vintage computing stuff would know everything that could be known, everything that was done, but this surprised me.
There's still,
Did I run
like new demos in Germany and
Oh, yeah,
other
they're
parties.
big there, yeah. And their demos are good, I mean, really good.
So what locked up there?
The one that really impressed me was 8088 miles an hour for PC, the one with the like, I think over 1,000 colors.
I haven't seen that.
Oh,
That was really cool.
I have to remember,
They got over 1,000 colors.
I'll have the source code and stuff at my
CJ.
my exhibit. Actually, I'm in the process today. I didn't expect to be doing this morning, but it's fun talking about it. But today I still got to do my PowerPoint presentation for my table, so there's something to see and read that explains this process. So it's kind of last minute stuff for me, but I appreciate you guys hanging around and talking about it. I think I locked up this emulator.
It'd be cool if they could make a version of 8088 domination for the Commodore, like one of the other machines.
Any other questions or anything you want to see here? I can't go through all this software. I'm still trying to figure out where the source code for that transfer was. This, that. I'll find it.
Eventually.
Yeah. Oh, that was it right there. It's on this disk. So,
What's your hammer you call?
KT6A.
I need to get one of those. I have one idea.
Get your license too.
You don't need to know Morse code anymore, right? Did they drop that requirement?
Yeah, they dropped that in '92, I believe.
Wow, that long ago.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, it makes me feel old.
I think they kept it a little longer for extra in general.
Well, that's what I have. I have extra, but you still don't need it anymore.
No.
You go no code for technician. That's how it was back in '92.
Oh, right.
But I got mine back when they were handing out novice. So I went through the progressions. Let's see, it was C64 TX.
Kind of jumping in the middle here, do you have any experience with anybody that's gone from technician where they took a code, so you had the general test with the novice code, of converting that to a general
No, there was
license?
a very narrow period of time that you could do that. It was like around '87 when they
Oh,
made some
really?
changes. I got mine in early '87, no, late '87. Early '87 they made the change, so some people before that would have been able to go to general with the code because they had.
Well, I
It was the
have
written
that.
part of
So was it a short period of time that you could do it, or you could still do it now if you got
Well,
your license during that
General
period?
class, well, you don't need code today,
Right,
but general class was 13 words per minute.
right, but I have the technician license, which
With the
at
5
the time
words.
was a general class.
Yes, that was that before pre-1987 stuff.
Right, so can you convert that to a general at this point without taking the test, or you just retake the test?
I think there was a window of opportunity. I don't know the rules on that one, but I do remember what you were talking about. Somebody said that, yeah, you could still convert it to a certain point, but they've changed the whole exam question pool, so maybe not anymore. It's like use it or lose it type
No
thing,
more
right?
vacuum tube questions.
Yeah, yeah, now it's all satellite.
With all the stuff that he did, I'm surprised he didn't make some kind of like hacked ROM like the C6480 line motor. I could see him being able to do something like that.
What for, we're talking this?
Yeah.
Oh, there's so many things that can be done. You could probably make this stuff a cartridge if you really wanted to, if you had the incentive to do it. Not much code does a transfer, but this DD01, that address, that is for the interface adapter that's on board. So he's addressing that, he's sending data to it. A little more magic in the works there. I started to decompile it just to see what's going on. I have that, not here, but I have it in my computer. I'm still working on it. But it's pretty slick. It's not a whole lot of code. And it just sits in, like, here, he comments, are you ready to receive? So yeah, I guess it's receiving, I think that's the 4th bit of that address. So that's probably the received communication line. So if there's anything present, it'll then continue on, or it'll move if, like it says, not yet. So it's commented enough, but I like to see it cycle through cycle. That's how I look at things for 6502 assembler, what it's doing at each command. Yeah, not a whole lot of stuff, but yeah, he is going through the DD01. If you look that up on a Commodore 64 memory map, it's going to be the interface adapter. One of the ports. I think they have port A and port B or something like that. They're a little technical, but it's the fact that somebody did that. It's ephemera. It's something happened in the past. You can't really put any use to it today. I don't even think the concept can be applied to modern programming. Because modern programming, you just load up a window and another window, and you're running your application. Or it's all web-based now. So
And most units use them.
The modern day equivalent would be dual monitors, right?
exactly. Yeah.
Or a copy of VirtualBox.
Yep.
Yeah, I would see you can do that too. Now, I guess a neat trick might be is to virtualize Commodore 64s. You know, I'm using WinVice for emulation. It's a very popular, very versatile Commodore emulator.
2 screens, you just need a
I guess if you can
program.
software connect the user ports of the 2 emulators, you can do the same thing here, but it'd just be for fun and giggles.
Is that serial? Is he reading bits?
He is basically, yeah, he's just bit banging, as they call it. So he's, now he has nibble. Maybe he is using more than, he might be sending it 4 bits at a time. Because this here is the mask for the CIA. It turns on bits that are going to be used for output or input. I think when the bits are, when you write a 1 bit to a particular register memory location for the interface adapter, it will create those 8 bits of that port as write, and the other, the 0 will be read, or vice versa. It's going to change which direction data can go. He's doing it apparently 4 bits at a time, so you might be passing 1 byte every 2 cycles for now, but he just probably sends 4 bits at a time, builds a byte, and then keeps going through.
Well, the fact that it asks for a ready says that there's some handshake.
Yeah, there's more than, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 wires here, so that's probably the 4 bits. Then there's handshaking. You know, I'll find out when I finish looking at the code. There could be some rudimentary handshake. I don't think there is, but maybe
Well, it
he
could
just
be-
has like clear to send type
Well,
stuff.
if you've got 7 wires, then there's probably a hardware flow control.
That
Where
would make sense,
you
yeah.
raise 1 wire, you raise 1 wire to say you're ready, and then drop it when you're not.
Yeah,
So when it's in the process of sending, you drop that ready,
and
and
you're probably right. Like I said, I'm still learning this stuff, and I have yet to see where the cable, where the user port connectors go to the internal hardware to see what's connected.
Yeah, it looks like he's using the upper 2 bits as
Like,
the,
There's this flow control, there's the
control,
data, right?
Yep.
There are people who claim to be geeks and they have no idea what they're talking about.
I claim to be geeks and then I'm learning this stuff.
I get annoyed whenever anyone uses the word life hack. It's like, you don't know what.
That's true. Well, yeah, today that's all language is all. Everybody has a little label about themselves and what they do. So yeah, now you got eyes on it, you can help me understand it too. So yeah, that makes sense what you're talking about. So the other 2 bits, so here's probably out and in, probably not using these 2, and then there's 4 bits for it, because when he says nibble, yeah, nibble traditionally means 4 bits out of 8. And then you saw that's right, upper 2-bit set.
What is NX?
What's what?
NX.
That's probably his shorthand for sending next nibble. I guess he wanted his text to fit on the line and
Yeah, he really needed any.
I guess geniuses have their own shorthand code when they type stuff.
Well, it takes up less space in memory.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know,
That's right. That's right.
Come on.
This is not Y2K compliant.
There's only 64K. You got to write tight code.
That's right. Yeah, I remember those days.
Genius commenter too.
Yeah, that's questionable. If it was hard to write, it should be hard to understand.
Exactly. Well, the guy didn't profess to, trying to keep any trade secrets for himself. He did this for fun. When I first talked to him, I told you how I first talked to him, I was on a ham radio conversation with him for 3 hours. That was the initial talk. We just talked a bunch of stuff. So that's what I mostly know of him. I have yet to meet the guy in person, even though he lives a couple counties away, and he's associated with some radio clubs that are near me that I don't attend. But I have talked with him recently on the air, and I email him occasionally. He's just not, he doesn't catch up on his email very much. But he's still active. I can get a hold of him. I can pick his brain. But he's like, he just kind of let it go and said, I'm not dealing with this anymore. Have fun with it. And that's the point right now. I want to make it more public. There's some things I want to learn from it, but I'm going to eventually release all this stuff to the public because it's just fun. I may try to get this on archive.org, all the source code. Let somebody else figure it out. Maybe they can adapt this thing to other 8-bit platforms. I'd love to see it happen on an Apple.
Rather than simply releasing it to the public domain, publish it under one of the GNU licenses so that any improvements are, that people who improve it are required to release their improvements.
And I would consult with him first. I asked him if I could do this stuff. He said, sure, take it, do it. So yeah, that's a good point. I should release it that way because I like to see it grow too. Who knows what the next person's going to do with it.
Right.
Get a life of its own.
You go through the development track too.
As far as, I never actually released anything that way, but I'm familiar with the,
It's the concept.
yeah.
You get credit for it.
I don't need credit, but I like to see it, growing. I don't want to lose track of it myself.
But there are people who do it. And it gets lost a lot.
And that'll happen with anything.
Is there any way is there a way that this can be used for any file to transfer it over, or basic programs?
Looking through his other source code, I think he does have, like LapLink, the old LapLink capability.
LapLink.
I think he does have code where he leveraged this, or maybe vice versa. Maybe he took that concept and turned it into something like this. I think he does have code that lets you transfer files through the same cable.
I know that a lot of people back in the day would you copy something out of a magazine and then you leave it on for 3 days because it took so long to enter and
Couldn't afford the
you only had 15 minutes.
$250 for a disk drive, yeah. Or didn't want to wait to save the cassette. Yeah, but still, you have to have it. You have to have it saved. That program saved out somewhere for it to. There's nothing to transfer otherwise. Unless you were talking about editing it here, say in basic, and then sending it over here to
Yeah,
play
like,
with it.
you could keep it.
I guess that would work that way. I guess this would be modified just to move the basic code over. Would that have been practical? It's just an open question to the group. Would that have been practical? Writing in basic and typing SYS over here and sending all the basic code over here to play with it while you still have basic open over here?
That's up here, SE.
I guess that would be
Yes.
useful to a
That's
certain
right,
extent.
at the other end of the room.
If you only had one disk drive, you could,
That's true.
if you had the other one, in,
Right.
like if you put it on a cart or something, you
Yes,
could, you
that-
could get
that would
away
be-
with one
that would be a
drive,
useful point for
yeah,
it.
something like that.
It's just the way somebody used their computer. I thought it was rather unique.
We are,
Let people know about it. That's my
no,
fun.
there's the beginning. I mean, the,
Anyway, I don't know if I ran on or no.
so
Oh, wow.
in this building.
I don't know who's coming in next or what.
Yeah, here's room 3.
What does the schedule
So,
say for
yeah, so
today?
you can't walk through here.
VCF tails in here.
At what time?
Well,
11:10.
full of junk.
Is that right? Yeah, 11:10.
They told me I'd have an
So
hour.
room-
There's
so
an hour.
room two.
The movie was supposed to take an hour and 10 minutes or something
Yeah.
like that. But
I'm gonna go and find out if I can.
if there's no more questions, I'm just
Start
going to shut
unloading.
everything down here. Or